Peace, y'all. This is part one of our three-part Marcus Garvey video series. This first part is just going to be biographical. I'm not going to really go into any details of Garvey's ideology, the implications of his theory of organization, his relationship to the nascent communist movement in the United States, or anything like that. I just want to lay out some of the biographical details of Garvey to talk about the timeline of events of the development of the UNIA and of the attempts of the Western capitalist system to undermine the efforts of this heroic figure and really central figure for the Black liberation struggle in the early part of the 20th century. Okay, so Marcus Garvey was born August 17th, 1887 in St. Ann's Bay, Jamaica, to a father who was a stonemason and a mother who was a domestic worker. Now, in the context of Jamaican society at that time, he was actually lower middle class. However, because of his color, as well as the penury of his father, who would mismanage some of the family finances, he had to drop out of school at age 14 and became a printer's apprentice. Okay, so he from 1901 to 1908, he worked as a trained printer, even though he had higher ambitions for himself than being a tradesman, right? He always had these ideas that he would be a global figure, a great orator, somebody in the mold of like a Napoleon or something like this, right? And these ambitions weren't just for him, but they were also a reflection of his belief in his people, in his race, okay? So Garvey was actually blacklisted from the printer's trade in 1908 following his participation in a printer's strike. As a result of this, he actually moved to Central America, specifically to Costa Rica at first, and then to Panama, where he worked as a timekeeper for the United Fruit Company, which was an American enterprise that exploited the shit out of our people, out of African people, right? And what Garvey learned in his sojourn in Central America is that Black people did not have any governmental protection, no matter where we were, right? So it's one thing to experience poverty in your own backyard, but when you go to other parts of the Western Hemisphere and you see that everywhere Black people are, we're suffering, okay? This throws a new light on the world situation, okay? And this would inform his later ideas about the necessity of forming a strong government by and for Black people that would protect us no matter where we were. So Garvey left Central America for England in 1912, where he worked for a newspaper called the Africa Times and Orient Review, which was an anti-colonial paper founded by the Egyptian scholar Dusay Muhammad Ali. So he learned a lot of his anti-colonial and Black nationalist ideas while he was working on the Africa Times and Orient Review. He read works by people like Edward Wilmot Blyden, for instance, who is sometimes called the father of African nationalism. But what was really formative for him was his encounter in 1914 with the thinking of Booker T. Washington. He says that when he read Washington's Up From Slavery, he realized his quote-unquote doom of being a race leader. Okay, so Garvey, fired with this new enthusiasm to organize his people, returned to the island of Jamaica in 1914, and with his fiancee, Amy Ashwood, he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Within 2 years, because of accusations of financial mismanagement, as well as other considerations like the color bar on the island itself, right, which admitted so-called brown people or the mulatto caste into higher ranks of society and excluded darker-skinned African people, Garvey decided to leave the island of Jamaica and to try to meet with Booker T. Washington to learn something from the Tuskegee model in the United States in 1916. Unfortunately, Booker T. Washington passed before he got there. So Garvey's original aim when he moved to Harlem, which was at that time the Mecca, the central hub for African people seeking freedom of expression and economic opportunity. his ultimate aim for the UNIA was to build something like the Tuskegee